Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Anita, the Joint Secretary of NIPM Calicut Group, and also your Master of Ceremony for this session. So, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow HR professionals, uh, NIPM Calicut Group, under the able guidance of NIPM Kerala chapter, proudly presents before you this expert webinar that is Code on Wages 2019. We are in association with Grady HR as well, and our event partners for this webinar are Calicut Management Association, CMA, and Calicut Forum for IT, that is CAFIT. And it is our immense pleasure to have one of the most veteran industry experts, subject matter experts, and labor law consultants, Sri Varkichan Peta sir, to be our speaker for the session on Code on Wages. So without much ado, let us move on to our session, Code on Wages 2019. First and foremost, it is with immense pleasure that I invite the captain of our ship, the person who has been spearheading all the activities of NIPM Calicut Group, our chairman of NIPM Calicut Group, Mr. Prashant Kumar. And I kindly request you, sir, to deliver the welcome address and to also introduce our eminent speaker.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Anita, for the excellent way you have presented. Today, most respected Mr. Varkichan Peta, today's expert faculty, Mr. Lal John, our chairman of NIPM Kerala chapter, Mr. Anish Aravind, our honorable secretary Kerala chapter, and Captain Haridas, President CMA, Mr. P.T. Harris, Chairman CAFIT, and my dear colleagues from CMA, CAFIT, and Grey HR, and NIPM chapter colleagues, and also my friends from NIPM Calicut Group and our enthusiastic participants. A warm greetings and very hearty welcome to all of you. Now, as you are all aware, the recently enacted 4 labor codes are going to seriously impact all organizations, employers, employees, and the HR professionals also. Reduction in the number of laws by itself is a good move and helps in rationalizing many things, including definitions of key aspects like wages, workmen, employees, employers, etc. It is in this context, in order to update and better equip all the stakeholders, NIPM Calicut Group, with the able assistance, guidance of NIPM Kerala chapter, is presenting today an online session on Code on Wages 2019. Our intention is to continue with other codes also in due course. Today, we are blessed or lucky to get Mr. Varkichan Peta, who has 4 decades of glittering, I repeat, glittering professional experience to lead our session on Code on Wages. With these words, my dear ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the most energetic, enthusiastic, and learned Mr. Varkichan Peta to you. And also I request Mr. Varkichan Peta to take over this session. Thank you. Thank you very much.
A very good evening to all of you. NIPM Kerala chapter chairman Sri Lal John, General Secretary Sri Anish Aravind, Calicut Group chairman Sri Prashant Kumar, Vice Chairman Rajesh N, Honorary Secretary Sri Firoz, Joint Secretary Anita, and all senior members of NIPM Kerala and Calicut chapters. My dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I express my sincere gratitude to Calicut chapter for giving me this opportunity, and also a special thanks to Sri Prashant Kumar sir for the nice words he talked about me. I will definitely try to do justice to what he has told about me. Anyway, we will straight away, we will go to the subject matter. You see, it was a long endeavor of the government of India to consolidate the labor laws, simplify so that the people will understand and it will be easy to follow. With this view, Second National Labour Commission under the chairmanship of Ravindra Verma was constituted in 1999. And the Second National Labour Commission has submitted its recommendation in 2002 to Vajpayee government. One of the major reference the commission was to make a recommendation how to codify this plethora of labor legislations. One of the major recommendations of this National Commission was also how to codify these labor laws. Actually, the Commission has recommended to consolidate the labor laws under 5 headings. That is wages, industrial relations, social security, safety, occupational safety, health and occupational safety, health and working conditions. Finally, the government has decided to consolidate these labor laws under 4 headings. That is how the 4 codes have come. The last 4th and 5th one has made one, and that is how the occupational safety, health and working conditions code has come. Now, the 4 codes, code on wages, code on industrial relations, code on social security, code on occupational safety, health and working conditions. These 4 codes subsume 29 labor enactments. All the 4 codes have been passed by the parliament. And as far as code on wages is concerned, every process except raising before the parliament and publishing the same in the code with respect to its rules has also been completed. For all the other 3, that is code on industrial relations rules, social security rules, and occupational safety, health and working condition rule, all published in the Gazette, inviting objection, suggestion, improvement from the stakeholders. And the last date of the final date, the last one will end in January 2nd. After that, there is only one process that government has to consider whatever the objections, suggestions, improvement has been received from the stakeholders, consolidate the same. If modifications are required in the rules published, it has to be made and placed before the parliament. Parliament need not pass it anymore. Then there may be discussion for a day and it has to be published in the Gazette and the effective date will be notified. Government is planning to implement these 4 codes from 1st April 2021. The speed at which it is going, I think there will not be any difficulty in implementing the codes from 1st April 2021. So this is the first code, that is code on wages. it subsumes 4 labor legislations: Minimum Wages Act, Payment of Wages Act, Bonus Act, Equal Remuneration. Once this code comes, these 4 labor legislations will be repealed. So now, looking at this, so how this consolidation has taken place, because really the consolidation has been taken place. If you look at these 29 acts which has been consolidated, it contains almost 1,342 sections. So that has been comprised into 470 sections. So almost it has been reduced to 38%. But how it has been done? Repetitions are avoided, common definitions has been brought in, registers and records, the number of registers and records has been reduced. Now, before we proceed into the contents of the code, let us see what are the important definitions. You see, first we will take the definition of a worker and employee. In every act which we are familiar, either there will be a definition of worker or there will be a definition of employee. If you look at the Industrial Dispute Act, the worker is defined. If you look at gratuity, employee is defined. If you define bonus, again employee is defined. So in some act it is the worker, some act it is the employee. But in the code, both the worker and the employee is defined. Why these two definitions? Even the chairman of the standing committee, Parliament Standing Committee, he has repeatedly asked this question. Why you define only one, either worker or employee? Why these two definitions are required? Actually, because of the consolidation, these two definitions are required. Otherwise, it will not be possible to consolidate, because some benefits, some rights are reserved only for the workers, but some are entitled for some. Every person in an establishment is entitled. So then who is the worker? The code says worker means any person who is employed to do any unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled, manual, operational, technical, clerical, supervisory job. If anybody is engaged to do these jobs, don't even look at his salary. He's a worker. The only thing he has been engaged to do an unskilled work, unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled, manual, operational, technical, clerical, supervisory. When it comes to supervisory, then there is the salary comes into picture. According to Code on Wages, if somebody is doing a supervisory job and if salary is more than 15,000 rupees, he will not be a worker, he will be an employee. He will come to the category of employee. But if somebody is doing only technical job, don't look at his salary. A pilot drawing 3 lakhs rupees is a worker. This is what in 2015 the Jet Airways has taken up with the central government. I can remove a ground supervisor easily, but I cannot remove a pilot because he has undue protection. 2018, even the Civil Aviation Department, Director General has taken up the issue when the Air India strike has come. But so far, there is no change, it stands. Then who is an employee? Employee also starts with the same definition. That is anybody who is engaged to do any unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled, manual, operational, technical, clerical, supervisory administrative and managerial. നമ്മൾ മലയാളത്തിൽ പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ തൊഴിലാളിയും ജീവനക്കാരനും തമ്മിലുള്ള വ്യത്യാസം. Worker means തൊഴിലാളി. ജീവനക്കാരൻ means everybody in that establishment. That is the difference. So when you read the code വായിക്കുമ്പോൾ, wherever it is stated that only worker, please understand that that benefit or that things are not, it's entitled only for the workers. But wherever it is stated employee, everybody in that organization, in that establishment is entitled. For example, if you see the definition of Industrial Dispute Act, worker എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. In all those places it is stated worker. Industrial dispute means a dispute or difference between employers and employees, employers and workmen, or between workmen and workmen, which is connected with employment, non-employment, conditions of labor of any person. But when you read the bonus part, it says there it is not mentioned worker, there it is mentioned employee. That means നിങ്ങൾ general manager ശമ്പളം 21,000 താഴെയാണെങ്കിൽ he is also entitled. Your general manager salary is less than 21,000 rupees, he is also entitled for bonus. ഇതാണ് നമ്മൾ not only this code, when you read all other codes, wherever you see the worker, the supervisor, only in this code, if code on wages മാത്രമാണ് this 15,000 cap is there. In all other codes it is 18,000. So wherever you see that, you see now we have seen that the approval for layoff, retrenchment and closure has been raised from 100 to 300. So is it the total strength or only on workers? So there it is stated that 300 workers, even if your company is having 750 people, 250 workers, 250 contract labor, 250 officers, you don't require a permission from the government even to lay off, retrench or close, because there it is stated that 300 workmen, 300 workers. So this is the implication. Now let us come to the most important definition, that is wages. Lot of discussions are going on because the employer, both the employee, everybody is concerned, interested with the most the concerned parties' wages. Employer is concerned because it is an expense for him. Employees, workers are concerned because it is the income for them. And let me tell you, remembering the definition of wages in various acts, even a good labor advocate or a consultant or an HR manager, it is very, very difficult to remember what is the definition of wages. Because it has been defined differently in different acts. ഓരോ ആക്ടിലും വ്യത്യസ്തമാണ്. Payment of Wages Act, it is defined in a particular way. When it comes to Minimum Wages Act, the definition changes. When it comes to Industrial Dispute Act, again the definition changes. When it comes to PF, the most complicated thing. The wages, the only exemptions are overtime, HRA, bonus and commission or any other similar relevance. Even the Supreme Court of India was to clarify the definition of wages as far as the Provident Fund is concerned 2 times in the history. First in 1963 in the case of Brick and Roof, because there the question is a particular allowance is whether it has to be counted as wages or not. So Supreme Court has told, if an allowance is paid universally, normally, ordinarily, it is not an allowance, it is wages. If you fix an allowance for a stenographer, 1,000 rupees, and if the stenographer is on leave for the entire 1 month, you still pay that allowance. Supreme Court has held that then it is not allowance, it is wages. Whatever you get when you take leave, when you are in a holiday, is to be counted as wages. Again in 2018, in the case of Vivekananda Vidya Mandir, after 55 years, it was to again clarify the same thing. So now let us see how this has been consolidated in the code on wages. In all other codes, the definition of wages is same. If you properly bifurcate and restructure, you will be benefited. But if you do it in a haphazard way, you will be a loser, I can tell you. So what is the definition of wages in the code on wages? So it starts with any other definition. Wages means all remuneration, whether by way of salary, allowances, or otherwise, capable of being computed in terms of money, which would, if the terms of employment express or implied were fulfilled, payable to a person with respect of the work done in his employment. So this is the first statement. And then it further says it includes, because it is an inclusive definition. Wages is an inclusive definition. It can contain more things than what is specifically stated there. Specifically stated is basic wages, generous allowance, and retaining allowance, if any. Why retaining allowance, if any? Because retaining allowance is not there in every company. It is there only in the seasonal factories. Seasonal factory means a factory which works only 7 months in a year. After the 5 months, the factory do not work. But all the people are required once the factory reopens. So that the employer retains their services and a retaining allowance is paid. So the first part says it includes. That's why I repeatedly telling you it is an inclusive definition. It can contain more things than what is specifically stated, like basic wages, DNS allowance, retaining allowance, if any. But does not include. It exempts 11 items. And that 11 item, 10th and 11th, you don't worry. 10th is gratuity, 11th is retrenchment compensation and terminal benefit. Then A to I, 1 to 9, that is very important. The first one says any bonus paid under any law for the time being in force. That is, it's only statutory bonus accepted. Second one, the value of house accommodation or any amenities like water, electricity, which is given to a worker. Third one, the contribution of the employer to a provident fund or a pension fund. Fourth one, conveyance allowance. Fifth one, reimbursements. Sixth one, HRA. Seventh one is that all payments paid to an employee based on a settlement or an award or order of a court or a tribunal. Seventh one is overtime allowance. Eighth one is overtime allowance, and ninth one is commission. Then the definition further says the excluded allowance 1 to 9. If that portion exceeds 50% of the total wages, then exceeded part of 50% will go to the inclusion portion. That is why at the beginning I told you that it is an inclusive definition. It can contain more things than what is specifically stated. Basic wages, DNS allowance, retaining allowance, if any. Probably there may be doubt. We will discuss further at the end of the session or so, because so many people have told me that this wages is one probably so many people may require clarification. Anyway, we will, if required, it will be discussed further, because every organization now has to restructure the salary. Whether, because there are so many news the items, WhatsApp messages, even video clippings that take-home salary is going to be reduced, employer liability is going to increase. So whether the employer will gain or lose will depend upon the present structure, basically. If the present structure, according to the present structure, if the basic and DA portion is more than 50%, unless you restructure, you will lose. But if your present base structure, basic plus DA is less than 50%, yes, you have to shell out more money, because whatever way you divide, for all the calculation purpose of wages, you have to take 50%. Especially higher, those who are drawing higher salary, IT, I understand that IT people are also there. For example, in an IT senior person drawing 2 lakhs rupees, his basic salary is 50,000 rupees. As on today, absolutely there is nothing wrong. You calculate his gratuity based on 50,000 rupees, because the gratuity is based on only basic plus DA and all other allowances are excluded. But once the code comes, then you might have shown only 50,000 rupees as his basic salary. But once this code comes, then for the purpose of calculation of gratuity, you have to take 1 lakh rupee. You see, if he has 10 years service or 15 years service, whatever the provision you have made for gratuity, it is just going to be doubled. So those are the implications. This is a subject which probably we may have to go into further details. And another thing is that not very important to this code on wages, but since the definition is given, I will just mention, and then we will just go through. That is one of the major changes, definition of contract. See, as on today, the fundamental guidelines issued by various courts is that if you supervise, if you control the contractor's labor, then it can be construed as a sham contract. Once it is construed as a sham contract, the workers of contractor is entitled to raise industry dispute against the principal. But if you don't intervene in their supervision, control, and you look at the end product, measure the end product, or even you can inspect the end product, because Supreme Court has also told the right to accept or reject the end product cannot be construed as supervision and control. Now, it's all going to change, because the definition of contractor, the first part is what it is today. It coincides with the present definition. That is, contractor is a person who undertake to produce the result for the organization. ഞാൻ ഇവിടുത്തെ ലോഡിംഗ് എല്ലാം ചെയ്തോളാം, ഞാൻ ഇവിടുത്തെ അൺലോഡിംഗ് എല്ലാം ചെയ്തോളാം, ഞാൻ ഇവിടുത്തെ പാക്കിംഗ് എല്ലാം ചെയ്തോളാം. I will do all sanitation work. Yes, one who undertake to produce the result for the organization is a contractor. But the second portion, it also includes a person who supply the contract labor as mere human resource. That is the word used, as mere human resource. You don't have any other responsibility. He has been directed, asked, the contract is that you provide 15 unskilled labor, 5 skilled labor in every shift, every 3 shifts. And whatever, and what we will do with that labor, it is our business, principal employees' business. We will supervise, we will control, we will teach him, we will tell him what to do, how to do. It is a major deviation from the whole concept of contractor is changing. Anyway, that major portion is coming in the occupational safety, health, and working conditions code only. Now, we will understand when before the code on wages has come, we have read in papers that 50 crores of people are going to be benefited by this legislation. So who are these 50 crore? Arani Ambadu Kodi, and how they are going to benefit it. So the thing is, in India, it is estimated that the total working population is 50 crores. Out of that 50 crores, is only 10 to 15% are in the organized sector. That means only 10 to 15% of people are working in factories, in plantations, in mines, or shops and commercial establishments. They have social security measures. They are covered under PF. They are covered under PSI. If more than 10 means, they will also get gratuity. So they have social security. They have, most of them have minimum wages. But 85% people are in the unorganized sector. Landless agricultural laborers. They are in the villages, they are in the town, headload workers, everybody's. The one question is that if our minimum wage whether minimum wages is there for everybody or not. Here, many are under the impression that everybody has got a minimum wage. That is not so. See, minimum wages is not there for everybody. So what is the process of declaring minimum wage? Minimum wage, suppose government want to declare minimum wage for a particular industry or a particular category. The first process is that government has to include that industry or that occupation in the schedule. Then government should, two ways government can fix the minimum wage. It is in the code also, it is the same thing. That is one, by forming committees. You form various committees and ask them to submit the report, and that report is to be published as a preliminary report. Objection, suggestion, improvements are to be invited, and then the final decision is to be taken and the final notification is to be done. Another method is by notification. Don't form the committees. Government can take out the notification. And again, but objections, suggestions, improvements, 60 days time is to be given, are to be invited. And after considering all these suggestions, improvements, objections, they can take out the final notification. In the code, it is stated that if the government has decided to go through the second process, that is by way of notification, it has to consult Central Advisory Board. Otherwise, if it is forming minimum wages by committees, that is not mandatory. So, coming back to the point. So, like that, if the minimum wage, it is included in the schedule, the process is completed, and the minimum wages is declared, yes, then you have the minimum wage. Otherwise, there is no minimum wage. For example, in Kerala, for domestic workers, minimum wages was declared in 2017. The minimum wage declared. So 2016, suppose you ask, what is the minimum wage for a maid servant? No minimum wage. So that is the situation. Now, once this code has come, everybody will have the minimum. So how it is going to be implemented? How? What are the steps already government taken? What are the further steps government has to take so that everybody in India will have the minimum? You see, most of you must have seen the rules of the Code on Wages. In the rules, already 861 categories of occupation is declared under 4 headings. That is unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled, highly skilled. Under unskilled, 123 categories are identified. Under semi-skilled, 127 categories are identified. Skilled category 320 and highly skilled category 111. So like that, 861 categories of occupation has been already declared. It has come. It has come in the rules. You can go through. That's the first step is over. It's only 3 steps, very simplified 3 steps. Second step, the whole of India will be divided and will fall in any one of the geographical area. The government will decide 3 geographical areas. The first one is metropolitan area, it's called metro. Second one is non-metropolitan area, non-metro, and third one is rural. That particular zone may contain 1 district or more than 1 district. That only when the division comes, we will come to know. So, but what is the criteria? The criteria is that once the zone is decided, that zone, if the population is more than 40 lakhs, that zone will be known as metropolitan area. If the population is between 10 lakhs and 40 lakhs, that will be known as non-metropolitan. If it is less than 10 lakhs, it will be known as rural. So this is the second step the government has to do. Then there is only one more step. That is, for all these category, only 12 columns they have to fill. That is unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled, highly skilled. The left side you write metro, non-metro, rural. Right? In metro, what is the floor wage for unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled, highly skilled? Like that, fill 12 columns. Then you can find out the minimum wage for anybody at any place in India. For example, how to find out what is the minimum wage of a driver at Calicut? So first, what you have to see is you are going to engage a driver. So once this code comes, it need not be a big company or establishment to pay the minimum. If the occupation is there, you have to pay. Even if you engage a driver, you have to pay the minimum wages. So first you have to see where do the driver is described in the rules. So go to that for list. Okay, the driver is in the skilled category. Then you see where do the Calicut falls. Yes, it is non-metro. Then go to the third slab. What is the minimum wage for a skilled worker in a non-metro? It is 700 rupees. Yes, your driver minimum wage is 700. So what is central government is going to do? Central government is going to declare the minimum wage, which is known as floor wage. Central government will declare this floor wage for metro, non-metro, and rural for unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled, highly skilled. There is a process which is stated here. You have to consult the Central Advisory Board, and whatever the recommendation received from the Central Advisory Board, you have to circulate among the states and the opinion of the states to be considered, and finally you declare. So once this is declared, what will happen to your present minimum wage? For Palasalath minimum wage in the law, minimum wages are there for many industries. What will happen to that? Whether it will survive or it will disappear. What it is stated in the code is that once the floor wage is declared, you compare your existing minimum wage with the floor wage. If the floor wage is more, you have to pay floor wages. If the floor wage is less than what you are paying today, you have to continue with the minimum wage payment. So this is what is going to happen, and this is what is given in the code. Then another important aspect is rest day wages. If a worker works 6 days, then you have to pay on 7th day a holiday, a weekly holiday with wages. Some exemptions are there. If you find out a worker's salary by dividing 26, the monthly salary is declared, and you convert that monthly salary into daily salary by dividing it by 26, then the holiday is to be given, but payment need not be given. But if you find out the 1 day salary by dividing 30, you have to give the holiday as well as the payment. Then usually what we are doing today, if 6 days, if a person has worked 6 days, 7th day he will be paid with wages. But if there is a loss of pay, then he will not get that wages. He will get a holiday, but not wages. So there one change has come. Even if the salary is not drawn, but the leave is allowed by the employer. The leave is sanctioned. Okay, he has no leave, so it is loss of pay. But if that absence is approved by the employer, then you have to pay the 7th day wages. So that is one major changes which has come. Another important aspect is, for a person, the time rate is declared. His wages is 500 rupees. For example, a gardener. A person's minimum wage declared in time rate, can we make him work in piece rate? That's the question. So basically, let us take the gardener one loan cut in all that. So his minimum wage is 500 rupees. Then we enter into an agreement with him that, okay, I will pay based on the square meter of lawn you cut and make it properly. You can do that. Nothing prevents. But one problem is, by the evening, suppose he cut only 4 square meter. You have entered into an agreement that for every square meter, he will be paid 100 rupees. But after doing his job 8 hours, he could cut only 4 square meter, means you need to pay only 400 rupees. That is not possible. If it is less than what is stated in the minimum wage, you have to pay. But if he cuts 6 square meter, you have to pay 600. Subject to that, a person's minimum wage declared in time rate can be made to work on piece rate basis. Then the procedure for wage we have discussed. 130 like you Then another is a procedure for imposing fine. In the code, there are 2 procedures which is given. The first one is that you have to make a list of omissions and commissions on which fine will be imposed. You submit it to Deputy Chief Labour Commissioner, because now the only central rule has come. Probably here it may be RJLC. Get it approved and make it a notice and publish it in the notice board. Send a copy of that notice to inspector cum facilitator. The copy inspector cum facilitator. Then there are two ways. One is, suppose he commits an omission or he commits something which is done, which is listed in the notice. You issue him a show cause notice, and after getting his explanation, you decide if it is satisfactory, you leave it. If it is not satisfactory, you impose the fine. So this is one method. Then he can represent the matter to the Labour Department if he is aggrieved. But otherwise, there is another method also prescribed in the Act. That is, you make a report of these things. The other process is safe. Get it approved by the Deputy Chief Labour Commissioner and publish as a notice, send a copy to the inspector. Then, instead of the first process, you make a detailed note that these are the provisions, such and such person has violated it. I would propose to impose a fine and submit it to Deputy Chief Labour Commissioner. He will call both the parties. He will hear both the employer and the worker, and he will decide, and that will be fine. So this is the two methods it is given. The another major change is with respect to deductions. So let us examine what are the provisions as on today. As on today, deductions from an employee's salary can be only 50%. And if company has got a cooperative society and materials or the provisions are issued from there, then the recovery can go up to 75%. But this is applicable only to the people, or to the workers or employees who are drawing salary up to 24,000. Because today, the upper limit or the coverage limit of Payment of Wages Act is 24,000 rupees. One very important thing is, as far as this payment of wages, that limitation is concerned, that is going to be removed. Today, if your manager do not get the salary on 7th of the month, he cannot go to the Labour Department. He can go to a civil court claiming the violation of the agreement between you and him. But once this 24,000, because he is drawing more than 24,000 rupees. But once this code come and this 24,000 cap is removed, everybody will be coming under the Payment of Wages Act. Today you can recover, instead of 50%, you recover 70%. You cannot go anywhere because he is not an employee under the Payment of Wages Act. But after the code comes, you cannot do that. Now, as per the existing law, somebody is resigned. You have to make payment his dues within wages within 2 days. But if your manager resigns, your executive resigns, or an engineer resigns, and his salary is more than 24,000 rupees, if you do not pay within 2 days, nothing is going to happen because he is not an employee under the Payment of Wages Act. But once the code comes, once this 24,000 cap is removed, you have to pay him also, because he also become an employee under the code, especially in that part, Payment of Wages Act part. Then another important thing is, I told you, as per the new code, even if it includes recovery to the cooperative society or whatever it may be, the recovery cannot go beyond 50%. If the recovery is more than 50%, you have to push it to the next month. There also, if it is, you are not able to recover, just push it to the next month. But no month you can recover more than 50%. Then what are the recoveries which can be done? It is stated in section 18.2. You can go through. Then one question I will ask, I am asking on behalf of you, whether this recovery includes statutory deductions, or statutory deductions are over and above 50%. No. Statutory deductions are included in this 50%. Then another very important aspect is, under section 18.2, deduction towards absence from duty is also one of the items. What does it mean? What is the impact? What is the implication? That means if a worker or an employee has worked only half of the month, then no recovery is possible, because already 50% is recovered towards his absence. Yes, that is, he should be absent and without pay. If he is on leave and his pay is there, definitely you can recover further. That the recovery is possible. So that is with regard to the recovery. The another thing, you recruit a person and he requests, sir, please send me 5,000 rupees as joining traveling allowance. So you send that traveling allowance, and after that, suppose you recover it from him, that is illegal, because no recovery can be affected the money which you have paid for initial joining towards traveling expenses. Then another thing, a person is appointed, he said, sir, please send me 10,000 rupees. I have to make some arrangements at home. Then I will come. So his salary is 30,000 rupees. So he come and join on 15th of that month. So you prepare the salary. 15 days he has worked. So 15,000 rupees is his salary. Okay, I have paid in 10,000 rupees, recover. You tell the accountant, you first recover the 10,000 rupees. That is not possible. You any money paid in advance against the salary from a full month salary. Next month, I have a full month work in a salary you can recover. First month he worked 15 days. So yes, 15,000 rupees is there. 10,000 rupees I have given. So I will recover 10,000 rupees. That is not possible. So this is another thing which has been brought in the act. Then with respect to bonus, because bonus is also one of the important provisions covered under this act. See, one major change is with respect to it is with respect to very small companies. Otherwise, major companies, it has no effect. That is, as per the existing law, Bonus Act is made applicable to an establishment. That is, Bonus Act will be made applicable to establishment if it employs 20 workmen or employ 20 workers or employees on any day during previous 12 months. And once the act become applicable, then subsequently, if the number of employees come down, the act will continue to apply. That provision is going to be removed. Now it will be year-wise, smaller companies. Then that financial year, at least one day, if there is no 20 workers or employees are not there, then for that particular year, bonus is not applicable for that establishment. Now it is made year-wise. Then bonus 21,000, you know, the bonus is the calculation purpose, 7,000 or minimum wages, whichever is higher is taken. So minimum wages already mentioned, but 7,000, that will be notified by the appropriate government. That is what is stated in the code. Similarly, those who are drawing more than 21,000 rupees, they are also not entitled for bonus. That 21,000 rupees, many has got a doubt that whether it is a gross salary or basic plus DA. It is basic plus DA only. Please be clarified. So that figure also can be notified by the appropriate government. Otherwise, the bonus, there is not much change. Set off, set on initial first 5 years. If you establish an enterprise, first 5 years, the Bonus Act is not applicable. But in any of the year, during the first 5 years, if you make profit, you have to make the bonus payment. But there is no set off, there is no set on. Next year, if no profit is there, you need not pay. But after 5 years, then there is no exemption. Whether you make the profit or not, you have to pay the minimum bonus of 8.33, subject to maximum of 20%. So for calculation purpose, it is 7,000, that is not notified, but or minimum wages, that is already stated in the code. Then another question is, okay, now you pay the bonus based on the profit. The question is, can we enter into an agreement with the workers or unions that the bonus will be paid based on production and productivity? Yes, there is a provision. You can enter into an agreement based on production and productivity, but subject to the minimum bonus. If the agreed production is not there, you have to pay the minimum bonus, whatever stated in the Act. Similarly, that agreement cannot make a provision for paying more than 20% of bonus. Within these limitations, instead of paying bonus based on profit, you can enter into an agreement to give bonus based on production and productivity. And you can give advance, and that can be recovered from the final bonus. That provision is also there. Then another important thing, see, when the bonus is to be paid now, as per the Bonus Act, once you close the financial year, that is March 31st, before the expiry of 8th month, you have to make the payment. That is November 30th. So we pay during Onam, Tamil Nadu they pay during Pongal, this North India they pay during Diwali. All comes within that 8th month only. But there is another provision in the Bonus Act that suppose there is a dispute, then you need not disperse the bonus. You can wait. As per the present law says, you have to make the payment if the dispute is before the conciliation officer or before the labor court. You have to make the payment after the decision of 1 month. Now, one addition, one change in this code is that if the dispute is with regard to higher bonus, then before the close of 8th month, you have to make the minimum 8.33 you have to pay. If the dispute is whether it should be 10% or 15%, definitely 8.33 before that provision was not there. The existing provision is that you make, in the case of a dispute, you make the payment within 1 month of settling the bonus. Now, if the dispute is with respect to higher bonus, you have to make the payment of 8.33% of the bonus before the expiry of the 8th month. So that is one. Then another very important position, important aspect which is new, really new, is compounding of offenses. Out of court offenses can be settled. Employer, the biggest problem with employer is that once the case is charged, the trial will take place in the first class magistrate court. It's a big problem for the employer. He has to stand along with the criminal. So a provision has been brought in this code, not only in this code, in all other three codes, but slight differences are there, that the offenses can be compounded, can be settled out of court. So code on wages provision is that you can compound an offense. The offense, the punishment if the punishment does not include imprisonment. The punishment includes imprisonment, that cannot be compounded. So what in the code it is done is, for the first offenses, there is no imprisonment. First offenses are categorized into three. That is, no payment of minimum wages, less payment of minimum wages, no payment of bonus, less payment of bonus. Punishment is 50,000 rupees, but no imprisonment. And any other offense, it is 20,000 rupees. Then no records or improper records, 10,000 rupees. All these offenses, on the first time, you can compound by paying 50% of the amount. Then second time, what happens? The first category of offenses, 3 months imprisonment is there, then you cannot compound. The second category also 1 month offense imprisonment is there, you cannot compound. Though the improper records and no records, there is no imprisonment. Even the second time, you cannot compound, because there is a provision that if you repeat the same offense within 5 years, it cannot be compounded. So these are the with this provision only you can compound. But in all the other three codes, one improvement is there. There are provisions to compound offenses which involves imprisonment also. But only one condition is that imprisonment should not be more than 1 year. If it is more than 1 year, then another provision is that instead of 50% of the maximum fine, you have to pay. If the imprisonment is there, 3 months imprisonment is there, not in the code on wages, but in all other codes, you can compound. But instead of 50%, you have to pay 75%. So that is one aspect. For compounding, actually, the procedures which has come in the code, that you need not apply. Once the offense is charged against you, the government is going to appoint a gazetted officer. He will write to you, that is, an offense is charged against you. And it contains 3 parts. The first part, what is the offense? And who is the responsible person? Then second part, it narrates that if you do not compound, what is going to happen? What are the consequences? The third portion is that if you like to compound, what is the money you have to remit? Because there is another provision brought in. The money which the central government as well as the state government, which are going to be collected by compounding the offenses, will all go to the social security fund of the unorganized workers. Government is not going to pay. It will be going to the unorganized workers social security fund, and gig workers and platform workers social security. Then this will be sent to the employer. You fill up the thing, remit the money, fill up the details, send it back. Yes, it will be compounded and you will be sent a certificate. This can be done even if the case is registered and case is transferred to the magistrate court. It can be before or even after the compounding can be done. So this is one provision. So this is a very good provision so that you need not go and stand along with the criminals. But only in the code on wages, there is a very damaging provision is given. As far as employers are concerned, one damaging provision is that today, suppose you violate a labor law, what happens? What is the procedure? Then that violation, cognizance has to be taken by the assistant labor officer. And with the permission of his superiors, he has to file a case, criminal case. If he proposed to file a criminal case, yes, he only can file a criminal case before the magistrate. But in this code, unfortunately, in this code only, in all other three codes, it is not there. The authority has been given to the affected worker and also the trade union to go directly to criminal court. It is very dangerous. Because suppose you don't pay bonus. The trade union leader, if he has an axe to grind with the employer, he can ask if 10 workers are not received, there is a provision that all the 10 can together make an application. But the trade union leader says, one by one you go. Let the employer take bail on every case. Let him come to the court every day. So this is really a very bad provision. But I think government has realized, and in all other courts, it is not there. The cognizance can be taken only by the government official, and specific provision has been given that the prosecution cannot be taken unless you give an opportunity for correction. Then only the prosecution is to be taken. So that is one provision. Another damaging provision for the employer is, see, as on today, suppose you don't pay minimum wage to a person, shops and commercial establishment, you are running a shop or even a factory. A person come, he said, sir, please give me a job. Then he said, then the employer says, yes, but what is the salary? Sir, whatever you feel, you give. I have no job today. But we know that his salary, the minimum wage is 500 rupees. So we said, I will pay you 300 rupees. He agreed. And he starts working. He don't make any complaint. You are paying 300 rupees. He is also very happy. But after 2-3 years, then he is established. He started Lord Jacob. As of now, what is the situation? 300 rupees, 200 rupees difference is there. His minimum wages is 500 and he is paid only 300 rupees. As of now, what is the position? He can claim the back wages only for 6 months. But once the code comes, he can claim back wages for 3 years, 36 months. So that is a damaging position for the provision, damaging position for the employer. Then other things, it is also there whether the audited balance sheet can be, in a bonus meeting, whether audited balance sheet can be questioned by a trade union. Generally, no. If an audited balance sheet is there, it cannot be questioned. But the authority feels that, yes, whatever union is asking, it has got a merit and it need to be answered. then he can ask explanation from the management. And if he feels that that is correct, then he can, if he feels that that is to be informed to the union, he can inform. Otherwise, earlier also it is there. As of now also, the provision is that the audited balance sheet cannot be questioned, and employer need not file any affidavit once that is audited by chartered accountants, authorized person under the Companies Act. Its authenticity need not be proved, or no affidavit before any authority, including a court, is to be. Then another provision which is really damaging to the employer is that the proof of the evidence, the responsibility to prove has been shifted to employer. That is, suppose somebody makes a complaint. The authority cannot ask him, sir, I did not get a bonus. This clause is called burden of proof. Sir, I did not get a bonus. Sir, any bonus കിട്ടിയില്ല. അതിന് നിന്റെ അടുത്ത് എന്താ തെളിവ്? What is the evidence with you? Once the court comes, the authority cannot ask like that. The authority has to summon the employer. And he should tell the employer that he says that he did not get the bonus or he did not get the minimum wages. You prove that the same has been paid. You paid the bonus or you paid the minimum wages. Employer has to. Then, suppose employer has no proof. Employee also has no proof. Then the Evidence Act says, Section 102 of the Evidence Act says, if both has no proof, then whoever having the burden of proof will be considered that he has failed. That means you have to pay the money. So, whenever you settle the account of a person, please obtain a no-claim certificate. A simple no-claim certificate will do. Just write no-claim certificate. Having received rupees so and so, I hereby declare that I have no further claim towards the management of so and so company on account of my employment. You put the start date and the end date. You ask him to sign. You ask two witnesses to put the signature. And if any such event, you produce this. Because entire, even the criminal law, everything it says, the documentary evidence will prevail over oral evidence. Both says, he says, I didn't get. The employer says, I have paid. Both are oral evidences. But if somebody produces a document, that will prevail over the oral evidence. Because the court has many times, the fundamental principle is that documents speak louder than the words. So please, whenever you settle an account of an employee, please get a no-claim certificate. Then, another very important thing is, what are the responsibilities if you engage the contractor? See, as on today, as per the Contract Labor Regulation and Abolition Act, Section 21(4), if the contractor do not pay the wages, or if he pays only the part wages, the responsibility for making the wages or the balance wages lies with the principal. That's all. So of today, principal employer is not responsible for the bonus, gratuity, etc. Especially the very famous judgment of Kerala High Court in the case of Cominco Binani Zinc Limited, that employer is not responsible for making the bonus payment or gratuity payment. Now that position is going to be changed. As far as this code on wages is concerned, if you engage a contractor, the first responsibility is what provisions are there as of now. That is, if you do not make the wage part, you have to make. Second thing, another responsibility is that you have to clear the contractor's bill before the payment date of the contractor. The contractor has fixed his payment date on 7th. At least on 6th, you have to clear his bills. Whatever bills submitted on 30th of the previous month, you have to clear. Suppose you don't pay, and if he is he delay the payment, then things will be different. Then another provision in this code on wages is that suppose the contractor is not paying the bonus. So there two situations are described. One is that contractor and workers are in very good terms. They said, sir, we have no complaint. We are working with him for the last 15 years. Some problem may be there, a difficulty. I know, we know the contractor, he will give. Even if it is after the Onam, we don't have any complaint. So as a principal employer, the code says, it is in the rules, the rule 57. You don't take any action. Let them settle among themselves. But if the employee or the union make a complaint to you that he has not paid the bonus, whatever may be the bonus he has paid on the previous year, don't worry, you have to make the minimum bonus. Similarly, though not in the code, it is only in the Social Security Code, the gratuity liability is will also come on the employer. Because as of now, there is no liability, but once this code, especially Social Security Code, says if the contractor doesn't pay the gratuity, the principal employer is liable to make the payment. So these are the changes with respect to the change of with respect to this payment of with respect to engaging contractors. So these are the important provisions. Now it is 8 o'clock. If time is there, we can discuss further. So we will move to question and answer. Let's move as per the schedule. That is better.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for this very elaborate session. I think I speak on behalf of all the delegates when I say that we are in awe of the ease and the fluidity in which you're talking about the labor code on wages. If it was any new gen HR professional, they'll be using an HR presentation and referring to that. But you just speak so easily about these labor code on wages. We are really respecting your knowledge. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
So moving on to the Q&A session, we have our very efficient NIPM Calicut Group members, Samira and Smita, who are going to handle the Q&A session. So over to you, Smita and Samira.
Thank you, Anitya. Varkichan sir, we have a few questions in the chat box. Let us quickly address that. The first question actually is on code and Social Security Code actually. The first question is that we are providing Star Healthcare insurance to our employees. We have more than 10 employees now and we didn't take ESI registration till now. In this case, is it mandatory to take ESI registration? That is the first query.
You providing some medical facilities, medical insurance has nothing to do with ESI. The moment you have 10 employees, you have to cover them under ESI. And among all the labor legislations, please be careful of PF and ESI. Because suppose in other labor legislation, suppose you don't pay, what happens? Then it has to go through the entire process. Then finally it has to be assessed, and the recovery certificate will be forwarded to the collector, and the collector has to go for the revenue recovery. For PF and ESI, no such things are required. Once the assessment is over, and if you do not go for appeal and get a stay, in 1991. Income Tax Act, second schedule and third schedule has been made applicable to Provident Fund and ESI. They need not go through the cumbersome procedure, they can simply attach your bank account. Just please be careful with PFESI. Then whether you have 10 people, now in the code, it has clarification has come, whether they are coverable or not. If 10 employees are there, you have to cover. The only thing, the establishments like you, which is in the brim, there are certain Supreme Court decisions, I will tell you. That is, you imagine a situation that there are 8 workers and 2 partners are there, whether you are coverable. So Supreme Court has clearly stated that if they are partners, they need not be counted. You need not cover because you are only 8. Another situation has come. 10 workers, 9 workers, 1 managing director. There's another situation. You know, managing director in many companies need not be the owner. The chairman will be the owner, but managing director can be a paid employee. So the court has even that case has even went up to the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court has told, in that case, you have to see whether the managing director is drawing salary or not. If the managing director is drawing salary, he is entitled for salary. Yes, he may not be coverable, but he also to be counted. So your Star Health, nothing to do with the provisions of the Act, you have to cover.
Okay, going on to the second question. Actually, I'll be clubbing 2 questions which are on the similar lines. The question is, kindly elaborate what is meant by of all remuneration calculated under this clause. Codes that's given in the codes has given in the proviso to section 2Y definition of wages given in code on wages. There is another question on the similar lines. Do we have to follow a specific breakup as per the new law? If it is, can we get a guidance in this session?
You see, when I discussed with respect to wages, I told you that the wages is an inclusive definition. That means it can contain more things than what it is explicitly stated. Explicitly stated is basic wages, DNS allowance, and retaining allowance, if any. But at the beginning, it is told all remuneration. So what does it mean? That is, whatever not specifically excluded, that is 1 to 9, A to I. If you put any component which is not specifically excluded in the exclusion part, it will go to the inclusion. That is what you have to be careful. Restructuring, I have already told you, it depends on whether your basic plus DA is less than 50% or more than 50%. More than 50%, unless you restructure, you will not get the benefit because you have to basic plus DA, you have to take for all calculations.
Sir, add on to that part, how the structuring part, do we need to follow kind of like this much percentage should be the basic and this percentage should be DA? How will be that? Is there any hard and fast rule of the total salary percentage?
No such law governing that. See, there is no law stating that out of the total salary, this much percentage, 40%, 50%, 60% should be basic plus DA. There is no such law. So it is for you. And now the court says you divide in any fashion. But if you are
50% should be.
If your exclusion part is more than 50%, yes, it will then that more than 50% part will go to the inclusion part. You do whatever you want.
Right. Okay. Coming to the third question, it is again on Social Security Code. The question is, how about the personal injuries? How is employer going to handle it? Will it comply with Social Security Code?
See, the thing is, the employment injury is covered under 2 acts. One is Employee State Insurance Act. And another thing is Employees Compensation Act. If your employee is covered under the Employee State Insurance Act, don't worry. Everything will be taken care by the corporation, ESI corporation, especially employment injury. Even the first day, if specialty treatment is required, yes, he is entitled. But if he is not covered under the ESI, then the Employees Compensation Act will come into picture. But there is a general notion that, oh, if ESI is not there, workman compensation is applicable. It is not like that. Workman compensation is applicable only if that person comes under the definition of employee as per the Workman Compensation Act. Because employee is separately defined. There are certain general definitions. For example, all the persons working in a factory connected with the manufacturing process, including the premises and the prisons, are workmen under the Workman Compensation Act. You need not even work in the factory building. If the factory building is situated in 15 acres and he was cutting the grass, and suppose he has bitten by a snake, yes, you have to give the compensation. So whether the employees who are out of the ESI, whether he will be covered under the Workmen Compensation Act depends on whether he is an employee under that definition. If he is an employee under that definition, then it may not be factory, plantation, or of course, mines is not applicable, plantation is not applicable, even shop. Even if you call a person at your home, I will tell you an example. You have engaged a person. So what is defined is any person engaged for construction, maintenance of building. And you ask him to work on the first floor and he falls down from there. Anybody you engage, and if he falls down from a height of 12 feet and above, you have to give the compensation. So the work is defined. For example, Mahot, Papan. നമ്പൂരിയുടെ ഇല്ലത്ത് ഒരു ആനയുണ്ട്, ചവിട്ടി വന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ കോമ്പൻസേഷൻ കൊടുക്കണം. മനസ്സിലായോ? അതിന് ഞാൻ ഫാക്ടറി അല്ലല്ലോ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് കാര്യമില്ല. The job is defined. Nurse ഉരുണ്ട് വീണ് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ കോമ്പൻസേഷൻ കിട്ടൂല, because nurse is not defined as an employee. So the employment is defined. Driver, anywhere, he will get the compensation. That is what you have to understand, the difference between ESI and workman compensation. There is a confusion. Many people think that ESI, out of ESI, and he is covered under employee compensation, workman compensation. No. Unless he is an employee as defined under the Act, he will not get the compensation. Now the problem is that up to 2010, the workman compensation, the provision was only to give compensation. Now you have to be very careful. What happens in 2010, the Act was amended. And in that amendment, it was brought in that the treatment is to be given. നിങ്ങൾ വീട്ടിൽ നിന്ന് വിളിച്ചോണ്ട് 12 അടിയിൽ നിന്ന് വീണ് വന്ന് അവിടെ വെസ്റ്റ്ഫോർട്ടിൽ കിടത്തിയിരിക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ദിവസവും ചിലപ്പോൾ 50,000 രൂപ, maybe you may have to spend 50,000 rupees every day. So be very careful. If he climbs more than 12 feet, you have to be very careful. If he falls down, you are liable to pay the compensation. Okay, next.
Sir, next question is regarding the EPF contribution.
No.
Once code on wages is in force, how will be the EPF contribution deduction? Will it still have the 15K cap?
Yeah, that 15K cap and the code has no relation. Unless it is increased by the EPFO, that will stand. Only thing, the See, today, what happens, that as far as the Provident Fund is concerned, only 4 components are exempted. That is overtime, HRA, bonus, and commission. All other items you have to take for the calculation of PM. But once you start paying 15,000 rupees, nobody can ask you any question. So that calculation now, according to the new calculation, it says if you properly bifurcate, you take only basic plus DA, which is 50%. So that advantage you will get. But that 15,000 has nothing to do with the code on wages. That is an entirely different act that will be decided by the Employees Provident Fund Organization and the central government.
Okay, the next question is, what about the registrations and returns as per the Code of Wages to be maintained and filed by the employer periodically?
Registers, it is all simplified. Now it's only 2 registers are required. One is an employment register, another is one more register. Otherwise, earlier the thing is that under Payment of Wages Act, there are number of registers. Minimum wages registers are there, bonus registers. Now all these registers are being comprised into 2. Similarly, returns is only 1 return. In those areas, very good changes are there.
Okay, the next question is, please guide on variable salary part. Generally, it is 10 to 35% of salary. Now, if basic is 50% and HRA is 50% of basic, it totals up to 75% of salary. Now, rest 25% has to be divided into PF, employer, ESI, leave encashment, medical insurance, gratuity, allowances, and variable pay. How is it possible? Does it mean we will have to do away with variable salary as a part of CTC?
Courts have, various courts have, including high courts, has made it very clear that CTC is not wages. That is the company's expenditure. That is not wages. It cannot be depicted as wages. Nowhere it can be depicted as wages. That is CTC, cost to the company. That is your company. That is not wages. And variable pay, especially for lower level for workers, there is no other than the incentive related to production. Variable pay is always associated with the officers only. So that has nothing to do with this code. That is a separate thing that comes in this, whatever comes in the CTC, which is not stated, that is not, will not be considered as wages.
I think he has asked more onto the VDA part, probably.
Yeah.
VDA.
Yeah. Variable salary.
Variable salary.
Yeah, I think the question is meant that the variable DA part is meant into the question. It seems so. Yeah.
See, variable DA, that is wherever the minimum wages are declared, even today, the DA is also declared how to calculate variable DA for shop. For example, some 300 or point above that, you pay for every raise of 0.26 rupees 65 paise, like that only. But in that one thing is that in totality, if you pay more than equal to or more than the minimum wages, for not paying a particular component, you cannot be prosecuted. That is what the very famous case of Air Freight Limited versus State of Karnataka. So variable DA, wherever statutorily it is there, you have to follow, especially the minimum wages. But the other part, for other employees, where it is statutory stipulations are not there, you include variable DA, or you can just basic, because basic and DA is always one component. But if it's a statutory requirement, you have to consider that variable DA is either shown separately or it is paid.
Okay. Next question is that what are the measures that we need to consider in the next year budget, like salary restructuring and its impact? Kindly advise. We have already discussed the salary restructuring part as per the new code. So anything
Yeah,
else?
your salary restructuring, I told you that depends upon what is your present structure. If the present structure, basic plus D is more than 50%, then you have to restructure. If it is less than, either you restructure to 50%, even if you do not restructure, for all purpose of calculation, you have to take 50%. For IT companies, those who are drawing very high salary, I told you the impact is going to be there for gratuity. Because as on today, the person drawing 2 lakhs rupees salary, his basic salary will be 50,000 rupees. Now, once the code come, you have to take 50% for the calculation of gratuity. There, if he has already worked 10 years, 15 years, means it will be a great impact. That you have to, additional provision is to be given.
Okay, the next question is, what major shifts do you gauge for companies adhering to shop and establishment?
Shop and establishment, as far as there is no mention about shop and commercial establishment, because it is not a central act. It's all state act. Most likely, that will continue as it is.
Thank you, sir.
And the next question is like, if we permit a 1 month leave for an employee, shall we need to pay 7 days, that is Sunday's salary?
See, one important thing which many may not have noticed, I will tell you. For the Factories Act says that after 6 days, you give a holiday, a weekly holiday. But nowhere it is stated that weekly holidays is to be paid. It is a monthly payment, yes, that weekly holiday is included there. If you want to see this specifically, you can look at the provisions for layoff. That is 23C, I think 23C, that is right of workman laid off for compensation. It is clearly stated there. A workman who has been laid off is entitled for layoff compensation to the tune of 50% of basic plus DA, except intervening weekly holidays. Why? Because as per the Factories Act, the weekly holidays are not paid. Have you ever heard that, okay, contract workers are working? Have you ever heard in a factory a case that the weekly holidays payment is not done? If you do not give a holiday, yes, that is a violation. But payment, that is, there is no payment for that in the factories. That is the situation. This many may not have understood. Similarly, in Factories Act, it is clearly stated that if a person take 1 month leave, you can deduct only 26 days from his leave account. You cannot deduct 30 days. Similarly, if it is annual leave, intervening holidays, yes, shop active term only prefix and suffix. But factories, intervening holidays, you cannot deduct from the leave. The law. Clear?
Okay, I think so that clears up. Yeah, I think so that clears up the doubt. The next question is on payment of bonus. Do we need to pay statutory bonus for employees whose basic plus DA is more than 21,000?
No, they are not entitled for statutory. Once the basic plus DA is more than 21,000 rupees, he is an excluded employee. He will not get statutory bonus.
There is another question following to that regarding bonus. Regarding the bonus act, for startup company have exclusion for some years. Even after exclusion period, the company is not in profit situation. So in this scenario, do we need to give bonus to employees?
Yes. After 5 years, whether there is profit or not, you have to pay the bonus. But you pay only minimum bonus. But for the first 5 years, if you pay only on those years in which if you make a profit. Otherwise, for the first 5 years, there is no bonus. After the 5th year, whether you make profit or not, you have to pay the bonus. The only thing, you pay the minimum bonus and it can be set on. You can keep it pending. And whenever you make a profit, it can be adjusted against that profit. But that is possible only if you make the profit within 4 years. After 4 years, it is gone. Similarly, suppose more money is there than the 20%, that also can be set on. But again, suppose you continue to make profit, the first the amount which was set on, you can take away. But if any adjustment is required, you have to take the money from the first one. So 4 years you have to set on and set off. That is mandatory. So first 5 years, no bonus is to be paid. But if any one of the year, if you make a profit, only for that particular year you have to pay the bonus. And after the 5th year, whether you make profit or not, you have to give the minimum bonus.
Okay, the next question is that are there any provisions to deduct penal wages if workmen proceed on strike while conciliation proceedings are going on?
Yeah, good question. Actually, the deduction of wages, the two things are stated. For strike, whether the strike is legal or illegal, no wages need to be paid. Very clear. But there is a provision in the new code as well as in the Payment of Wages Act. You must have all heard that, okay, for 1 day strike, 8 days wages can be deducted. So what is that provision? So if 3 conditions are satisfied, then you can deduct 8 days wages for 1 day strike. First condition, that is there in the code also. First condition is that in that strike, minimum 10 workers should be there. Second is that strike should be without a notice, flash strike. Third is that it is for an unreasonable cause. Suppose your supervisor has beaten a person and he is in the ICU and the workers stop the work and you cannot deduct 8 days wages. So if these 3 conditions are met, for 1 day strike, you can deduct 8 days wages. One addition which has been brought in this code is that if there is a complaint, the workers has to go to the authority. But in this code, the provision, a new provision is added, that is, if you deduct like that, disproportionate, you know that 8 days has to be, you can deduct 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 4 days, 5 days, maximum 8 days. But if you make a disproportionate deduction, then you have to, within 10 days, as per this code on wages, you have to inform the inspector cum facilitator. And he has to examine, and if it is wrongly deducted, he has to proceed against the employer. That is what is taken. But for strike, whether strike is legal or illegal, the wages can be deducted. That one question which the Supreme Court has answered in one of the very famous cases, that is Bank of India versus T.S. Kelewala. For deducting that money, whether the union and workers has to be given a notice. So that explanation is to be sought. Supreme Court said no notice is required because it is not a punishment. It is, you are imposing the conditions of service. That's all. No notice is required. Whether strike is legal or illegal, no wages will be paid. If you work, you will get wages. That is why Supreme Court has held that the work and the wages can go only together. The work is not there, no wages. No wages is there, the worker also will not work. It can only go together. Another question, interesting question, since a strike has come. Suppose a person is there in the work spot, but he is not working, and he says, I want wages. Are you liable to pay? Supreme Court in the same case, Bank of India versus PS Kalawala, said, no, don't pay, because it specifically cited what is the definition of wages in the Industrial Dispute Act. And it has extracted a particular portion that is paid if the terms of employment, express or implied, are fulfilled, be payable to a worker. You are paid not to just for your persons. You have to sell the labor to the master, and the master will pay. You just simply stay at the work spot, no need to pay. Okay.
Okay, sir. The next question is, if our employees' minimum net salary is more than 15,000, in this case, is it required to take PF registration? We have more than 20 employees.
Yeah. PF registration, the moment, no. How many employees are there? If it is less than 20, no.
No, they have more than 20.
More than 20 you have to take. Whether they are coverable or not is immaterial. The moment it crosses 20, including contract labor, you have to take the registration.
Okay, the another query is that there are daily wage employees and we need to cover them in the ESI, and is it mandatory to cover them for PF also?
Earlier there were some exemptions in fancy period. All those things were there. In 1990, this all stopped. Day one coverage. Even if you employ a person for a day, you have to cover him in PF, you have to cover him in ESI, the establishment is covered. The only exemption which is given is that individual contractors, that is in the one case, that company is in Karnataka. In fact, that case went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has told individual contractors. Individual contractor means there is a repair for your AC. The one person has come. He repaired, he took his money and has gone. He is an individual contractor. He is the contractor, he is the worker. But if he comes with another 5%, then the situation is different. So only individual contractors. Your computer is under repair. A person has come, he has done his job, he took the money and went. He need not be covered. Every other person has to be covered under PF and ESI from day one. You know the consequences. It is not like any other act. If you do not cover these people, the consequences are severe. The first law is that employee contribution can be deducted only from the current wages. If you have not recovered employee contribution, the next month, if the inspector comes, next year, the inspector comes, the entire contribution of the employee, you have to pay. You cannot recover it from the employee. Then from the date of the payment, which has to be made, from there, 12% interest. No hearing is to be given. Then, apart from this, the damages. Damages only up to 6th month. There is a scale. That is, if the delay is less than 2 months, 5% of the assessed amount. The 2 months completed, 4 months not completed, 10 months, 10% of the assessed amount. If the 4 months completed and 6 months is not completed, 15% of the assessed amount. Once the 6th month is completed, per annum 25%. It's a huge money. So therefore, don't take risk with the ESI and PF. It is dangerous because they have the powers. I told you, same income tax powers are there. Second schedule and third schedule has been made applicable to them in 1991.
So let's move on to the final part, but the most important part of the session, which is the vote of thanks. We have our General Secretary of NIPM Calicut Group, Mr. Nizamuddin Feroz, who's going to deliver the vote of thanks.
Very good evening all. And on behalf of NIPM Calicut Group, we would like to express our sincere gratitude and special thanks to Varkijan sir for the wonderful section. And the section was very informative. We had a lot of confusions and doubt. So we can say that, so we have cleared almost all the confusions and doubt with the help of this section. So once again, thank you, sir, for your energy and time for this section. Yes. And so we would like to extend our sincere gratitude to Grey HR team. They are the event sponsors. So Grey HR team, thank you for your support and expecting the similar kind of support in the upcoming program too. And special thanks to our event partners, Calicut Management Association and CAFIT. So they are the event partners. So thank you CMA and CAFIT for your great support. And special thanks to Kerala NIPM chapter, Honorable Chairman Lal Sir, Honorable General Secretary Mr. Anish Aravind, and Admin Reviji for the great support for this event. So these people are very important, NIPM Calicut Group. So without you people, this could not be possible. And special thanks to Mr. Prashant sir, NIPM Calicut Group Chairman. He is a mentor of our group. And thank you, Prashant sir, for your support and energy. And Mr. Rajesh Kumar is our Vice Chairman, NIPM Calicut Group. Thank you, Rajesh ji, for your support for the overall event coordination and support. And Mr. Dinesh Verma is our treasurer of NIPM Calicut Group. Thank you, Dinesh ji, for the financial support and your energy. And Mr. Jitin Chakalakal is our joint secretary, very energetic joint secretary of NIPM Calicut Group. Thank you, Jitin, for the digital promotion and overall coordination for this event. And Mr. Jerry, NIPM Kerala chapter. Jerry, for your thanks for your support for the digital promotion and overall support and mentoring for this success of this program. And our executive members, Miss Anita, Joint Secretary of NIPM Calicut, Miss Samira, the executive member of NIPM Calicut, Vishak, NIPM Calicut Group executive member, and Smida, NIPM Calicut executive member, and Habib, executive member of NIPM Calicut. Thank you all for your great support. And thanks all the participants for your active participation in the Q&A section and overall wage code section. And thank you. We are expecting the similar kind of support from your end in the upcoming programs. Thank you all. Good night.